I think right now I want to focus on doing a great job with what I'm doing and, but being able to also balance that with my family and what my family needs right now. And my son plays travel baseball. My daughter's getting into gymnastics. What prompted the change for me to go to Empower was I went to gymnastics with my daughter and she asked me, she's like, can you watch me today instead of working? Because at 7 p.m. I was still heads down in my computer at gymnastics. And I want to be present for that.
Welcome to Future Driven. I'm Adam Kopp, and on this podcast, I talk with entrepreneurs and industry professionals about the challenges and the wins in their business. See the vision, drive the future. Okay, welcome to episode 28 of the Future Driven podcast. I'm excited to have an old friend and colleague, Allison Tesnar. Allison, thanks for jumping on the show with me.
Thank you for having me.
So Allison and I were just catching up off camera, and it's been about 15 years ago that we both worked at RPM Advertising, and she's got a fruitful career that I want to dive into. But what's one thing, Allison, if you can think back to the RPM days that you just that you want to remember and share? Because I got a couple of fun ones.
Is this a family show?
Of course. Well, I guess it could be whatever version you want.
I mean, the parties were insane. Those were some of my favorite times. And really it was like the breakfast the next day. What was that Cajun place that they always brought us breakfast from?
Yeah, that was the big thing about RPM and maybe the agency life back then, that they wanted to capture you, they wanted to keep you there, they wanted to keep you excited. Because I was telling people here at my office, like, we're done at basically 4:30, 5 o'clock every day. Like there's not very few times that we're there till 10, 11 past midnight. Like that was the norm back then.
Oh, remember there were showers and futons because people would sleep there because you didn't bring work home. Like not everybody had a laptop. Barely anybody had a BlackBerry at the time. Oh my gosh, Adam, we're old. But if you needed to do your work, you were sitting at your desk.
Yep.
So we had a lot of fun, but I loved RPM. I mean, I just feel like we got our hands in so much. It was a smaller agency. You'd be doing your client work. You could work on new business. All of a sudden you were pulled into a brainstorm. Hey, can you help me do this? Like, it was just very community-like. It was like a small family. And I just love that it was one of the best cultures that I had been a part of because everyone was really close.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was close. That's right. No, that was a really good experience. So, what have you been up to the last 15 years or so, leading up? I know you got a new position. We'll talk about that in a minute, but you've got a pretty impressive career. Kind of what's your main niche within the agency world, or kind of where'd you go?
That's a good question. So I would say that, the best decision that I made in my career was to recognize that digital was like here in the future. And it sounds so crazy now, but back then, I think it was really important. It was honestly the only reason I left RPM, and, they've come a long way, but at the time they weren't a digital agency. And I saw that, and I really wanted to be part of that world because I knew that learning that part was going to get me to my future. So I ended up moving to Resolution Media. And I feel like I got a master's degree in search marketing there. So, I did the first influencer campaign for LeapFrog toys. We with, bloggers, and we sponsored, something at Blog Her, and we sent people toys, and we created like these information sheets that we were sending around with the toys. And like, that hadn't been done before, really, like these were like really innovative things that we were doing, and they gave us the space to do that. So I think like recognizing that, and having both the traditional and the digital experience got me to my next role. Because then it started to become, okay, how do we now commingle everybody? How do we merge all of this together? And I was brought in on the BlackBerry account, actually, at Starcom to be the search person. And they called me searchy, that sits with the traditional team because they sat on completely different floors. It was always an afterthought. And it was like, how can we get a seat at the table? So those are some of the things that stand out. And then while I was there, I mean, social started to become a thing. And I raised my hand again and I said, yes, I want to be part of this, task force, maybe.
Yep.
Like a social task force to understand the space and to continue to educate the other teams about what are the opportunities, what's happening, hey, Facebook Exchange is coming out. What does that mean from a legal standpoint with PII? How do we talk to other teams? How do we work with clients on that? And I just loved that. Kept recognizing, what was coming and what was starting to be a thing, and just leaning into it as hard as I could.
So you're talking about, at that point, you're talking about Starcom, right? Which was, according to your LinkedIn, 2011 to 2013 that you were with them. So that's when, and that makes sense because that's really right when while social has been around since 2005 or so,
right?
It's really when it starts to pick up and become more of a mainstream or an actual agency deliverable. Right.
Absolutely. Like, we did some of the first, sponsored tweets or sponsored trends. And they were ridiculously expensive then too.
Yeah. And they just keep changing, right? And everything is just constantly changing. So then it looks like you moved to 360i and Accenture. Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because one of my old bosses from Starcom moved to 360i, and about a year later, so it was all legal, don't worry. Yeah. He kind of, he called me and he was like, I've got a great client that you need to work on here. I think you'd be awesome. And I'm like, I am not moving to Atlanta. And guess who 6 weeks later was traveling across the country with her family to move to Atlanta.
Oh, wow.
And this was a point in my career, I think, that I started making decisions for the family as well. We had been through some tough times financially. And honestly, 360i, I wasn't really looking to leave Starcom. I, had built a good reputation there. But this was an opportunity for the family I couldn't refuse. We wanted to move to somewhere warm. And the cost of living was less and the salary was more. So at that time, I was like, hey, even if we don't stay, this is a good move for me and as for my career, but also for the family. So I did a lot of the same things there. But I think I had recognized my strength of bringing teams together when I was at Starcom, bringing search to the table and really ingraining us into that conversation, and then social as well, just really sparked for me. Yeah. And then I feel like I did a lot of that at 360i and crossing over with other digital teams with the SEO team and really pulling things together to points where we were actually asked, working with other agencies too, but we were asked to, pitch for as AOR for one of our clients. And all we had handled at the time was search and SEO, paid search and SEO. So for them to ask that of a, small digital or an agency that handles a small part of their digital was really awesome.
Yeah, that's great. So you had just mentioned something about the thing that you liked or the niche that you found is pulling teams together. And I remember that from back when we worked together as well. And so talk a little bit more about that. Why is that so important? How does that help the client? Because that to me it's a big, it's kind of like strategy. It's a tough thing to kind of wrap your head around the value of it, but it's so impactful on the long run.
Yeah, it's funny because if you do the Gallup Strengths Finder, I'm a connector for sure. And it's interesting, excuse me, it's interesting you say that, because I guess I didn't recognize it at the time, but people said, like, throughout my career, like, you were always just so easy to work with. And truthfully, I think it's the simplest thing you can do is be inclusive and be nice to people.
Yep.
And they're going to want to work with you. Right. And I think it's so incredibly, helpful for the client to see that their teams are getting along and, they're working together. And that's going to come through in these presentations that have, so many different channels, especially today. They're going to see right away if it was built in silos or if it was built all together with the same strategy in mind. And my goal is always to show as much cohesiveness as possible. It's not hard to do. It's
right.
And it always shocks me when I, start a new client or come onto a team or something, like, oh yeah, the teams don't work well together. Like, why not? Why is it so difficult to work together? Like, fine, there are different personalities. Great. Who cares? If we're all nice to each other, if we're all, including each other, we can all get along. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that, you can still be, like, how do you say, like, strict, if you will, and like deadlines and communication and roles.
Sure.
You can still do that. It's so much of it is communication, delivery. That is a huge part in what you're talking about, whether it's working with internal team or the client and their team, because it just makes everybody feel better about the work that everybody's working hard to do.
Yes, 100%. Couldn't agree more.
So let's jump a little bit, because, to today, you're in a new position, VP of investment at Empower. Tell us a little bit about Empower and, what this new, rung in the ladder of your career means to you and kind of how it's different from everything you've done in the past.
I love that question. Empower is great. It's a I hesitate to say small agency because it's a mid-sized agency. They're out of Cincinnati, and they've really spent the last couple of years growing their footprint and gaining visibility in the marketplace.
What's a mid-sized agency, just so everybody knows, kind of like size-wise range?
Like 250, 300.
Yeah, that's mid-size.
Yeah. I've spent a good portion of my career at huge companies. I was at Accenture for 4 years, which is like 500,000 people. Been at the holding companies, part of Publicis, for many years, went there twice. I just finished my second tour at, an Omnicom agencies as well. And maybe that, back to our last, question of why people aren't working well together. It's so competitive. Right. And it's, you have to outdo everybody else to get to that next level. And I just felt like Empower wasn't that way. And all the people that I spoke with, everyone's just back to that, like, same feeling of being at RPM that we talked about, of like, everyone's in it together. We want to do the best work for our clients, and that's what we're here for. We lean on each other. They lean on me. People are already coming to me with questions like, hey, I heard that you worked on gaming. I'd love to pick your brain on this. And there's just not the same level of egos. And like, for anyone that I've worked with, I'm not saying that everyone has an ego, but it's just a different feeling being at a smaller company. They're family owned. They have no desire and no plans to be anything other than that. And, I totally drank the Kool-Aid. I was out in Cincinnati last week for our company party, and it was incredible. Like, people have been there 20, 25 years, and not just a few, like a lot. Some of these younger folks are like, I started my career here. I've been here 10 years. You don't stay somewhere in this market, in this industry, if you don't feel that connection. And I desperately wanted to feel that connection. at this point in my career and with my family, I also felt like there's a lot of folks around here that have kids. Someone canceled a meeting on me this morning, apologizing profusely because his daughter was homesick. I was like, dude, you're good. Like, we've all been there. But I felt like if I had a kid homesick, if I have to run and, pick somebody up or run a carpool or do something like that, I have the space to do that. And that was reiterated with, what our CEO, Jim Price, was saying at the meeting too. He's like, are we going to come back? He's like, I can't tell you that we're going to, make you be in the office. We're not going to. He's like, this is working. We want you to have balance. You're adults. You can make the decisions, get the work done. If you need to talk to your manager about coming in early or, shifting something because of your unique needs, go for it. Like, this is where the world is going, and they're recognizing that. And frankly, even throughout the pandemic, there were a couple of moments where I'm like, I got to make dinner for my kids because I've been on calls for 12 hours and I've basically ignored them. And that wasn't okay. I don't want to have that life anymore. I want to do good work. I want to be challenged. I want to work with smart people. But I don't want to be in that crazy frame of mind anymore.
And that's what we were talking about a little bit off camera, about having family-driven career decision-making. And it sounds like you're in a good spot now. And it seems like it's correlated to the size of company. RPM was 100-ish or something like that. And people. And then now with Empower being 250, 300, it seems like a nice fit that works for you. You get everything you want in your career, but you get the family flexibility, which is important to a lot of people.
It is. Why did it take me 15 years to come back to this world? I don't know.
Well, I know it's one of those things you got to kind of go through it to make sure that's what you want. And you learned a lot, right, at the different companies you've been at. And I mean, to work at a company with 500,000 people is an experience that not everybody gets. And you can correlate a lot of that to now your new positions that, gives you a lot of strength in a way that you can go back to those experiences and clients you worked on and so forth. So I think there's always a lot of, benefit to kind of going through the hard yards, but yeah, true. Sometimes we need those to remind us that this is where we want to be, for sure. I mean, like for me, I worked for other people for 18 years before I started Matic. And it was those 18 years that being on the other side of negotiations for salaries and flexibility and all that now drive all my decision-making with my team. And it gives me a huge, a lot of empathy for what young team members are going through, but while reminding them, hey, you've got lots of time to go, and it's kind of finding that balance. But I love that. I love that you have that lens, because it probably helps you make better decisions for your company and for your people, because you get it, you lived it. Yeah, and what, I've got young kids, you've got young kids. It's and with COVID being that flexibility, like I just had my 4-year-old in here for the first 2 hours of the day. And he went with me and we ran a quick errand. We did all this stuff, and, flexibility that normally wouldn't have had, if the team was back in the office and so forth. So agree. I just had to kick him out before we started this podcast. Otherwise it would have gone a little differently. Right. So I guess I want to dive a little bit more into Empower, and, tell us what does the company do? Do you know what your role is in VP investment is going to be like? And how is that different than everything you've done in the past? I think it's like a culmination of what I've done in the past. It kind of brings everything together, right? Empower is an advertising agency. We have some pretty big clients. I'm working on
Am I allowed to say that? I think so. I'm working on Brooks Running, Gorilla Glue, Famous Footwear, among others. And really what we do is we take their goals and their strategies and what they want to do, and we find the right ways to bring it to life and within, really every, I don't want to say channel, like every touch point.
Yeah.
We call it channels. Real people have no idea what we're saying and why that matters. But wherever you look, whatever you're doing in your life, if you're part of our target market, we want to reach you in those ways. And so my role is really to work across all of the different investment teams. So our subject matter experts for social and search and display and TV and, CTV and programmatic and e-commerce, like bring all of those together. And again, like take that overarching strategy and make sure that everything works in concert with each other. Right. I'm refusing to use the word synergy, but that's what it is. Yeah. If we have a big, huge TV moment, like the Super Bowl, which we don't, but like the Super Bowl or something like that, we want to make sure that there's budgets in market for search because people are going to search it. Do we have the right keywords? There's a very famous case study out there from like way back in the day when I was actually working at Starcom, and we had like war rooms on Super Bowl days, and the team had recognized that Ford had Kermit the Frog in their Super Bowl commercial to focus on their green cars.
Yep.
They didn't buy the term Kermit the Frog. So guess who did? GM. Very quickly. Someone created a keyword list, put it out on Google, and they took all of that market share. Anyone that was looking for the Super Bowl commercial with Kermit the Frog went to GM. Like, so simple, so stupid, but right. Like you have to make sure that your teams are talking and the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, because otherwise you're going to be on the wrong side of a case study. Right. So nice. That's what I do. And again, like we talked earlier, I've been on several types of teams. I think I do a really good job of, just piecing everything together. And understanding the strategy, but also just making sure that lines of communication are open, and everybody's talking and everybody's, working or playing nice in the sandbox.
Sounds like that's the theme. You're pulling everybody together, communicating and making sure everybody's on the same page, which is your strength. So that's exciting. So you just started Empower, and so lots obviously to come. This is the Future Driven podcast. What drives you forward? And you must have a lot of exciting things coming on, but like, what do you imagine the short-term, long-term for you in your career?
So we were talking about this a little bit beforehand. So I think what's coming here. Yep. But one of the things that I think we don't normalize and we don't talk about is how do you balance that family? And so like my future right now, I don't know. I'm in a good spot. I feel like I've worked really hard to get here. And there's been a couple of, light pauses like in my career, throughout to just make sure I'm taking care of me and taking care of my family. But right now I feel like I'm good. I want to continue to improve myself in this role, be challenged, let's focus on processes. Hey, there's always new things coming out. How can I, elevate my role as a resource within the agency, but without necessarily taking on so much more, because as once you get to those higher levels, there's an incredible amount of pressure and there's an incredible amount of travel, and being where the clients are that's needed. And I think right now I want to focus on doing a great job with what I'm doing and, but being able to also balance that with my family and what my family needs right now. And my son plays travel baseball. My daughter's getting into gymnastics. what prompted the change for me to go to Empower was I went to gymnastics with my daughter, and she asked me, she's like, can you watch me today instead of working? Because at 7 p.m. I was still heads down in my computer at gymnastics. And I want to be present for that. So I don't know. And maybe I'm the worst guest for you because of that.
That must have been a gut shot for you when your daughter said that to you.
It was hard.
I bet.
I had to take a minute, and I was like, okay, baby, I'll watch you. And it meant that I was going to be up later that night because I was ignoring what I needed to do. But that's what I don't mind working late. I don't mind, the hustle, because that's what this industry is all about.
Yep.
But I need to set boundaries for myself and to protect my family. And they're only little once. And you and I both know, like, it goes so fast. Everybody keeps saying that, but it goes so fast. My son's going to be 10 this month. And it's just like, I blinked and it happened. So we only have so many more years with him at home and him still wanting to talk to me. And I'm going to soak up every last bit of that.
Well, it sounds like that's a big turn in your career in life that's going to pay off massively, because it does go fast, and before you know it, he's going to be driving off to college, and you're going to be wishing that you had all that time back.
Seriously.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I really look forward to kind of seeing how things go out with you and Empower. And I've really enjoyed catching up with you, and I'm with you on the work-life balance with family. It's so important. And we just got to keep reminding ourselves, because we're all driven. We all want to do more stuff, and it's exciting to do big things, but it's the gymnastics,
right,
hour and a half or whatever it is that is so important to them that we need to make sure that we create space and time. I actually my son made a vault. It's a plastic, it's a plastic thing with a lid that they put my phone in it. So when I come home, they say, vaulted, Dad. And so I got to put it in the thing, and I got to put it up on the thing, and I got to ask them if I can take it out. So,
oh wow,
it's not every day.
How long is it in the vault? That gives me hives.
I know, exactly. It's not every day, but if they're really jonesing or they want to do Legos or whatever, they'll just say, hey, Dad, you got to vault it, and I'll throw it in there for like an hour or two. And because, you can do just so sneaky little things, whether it's an email or social or whatever, it can happen so fast. And then you're sucked in, and 10 minutes just went by, and they're like, hey, you didn't help me do this or whatever. So that's been a big, a change, I guess, that we did together as a family. My wife might have something to do with it too, because she said vaulted too, but
I like that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get the kids a vault for Christmas for my phone.
That way you can empower them to say, you know what, because we have kind of a time cut off. 6 o'clock is just kind of like the time that everything's kind of done and wrapped up, and it's family time. Because if you think about it, like, our kids still go to bed at like 8:30, so it's not a big window, right?
Right.
So,
we should be able to focus on them during that time, right?
Right.
It's just hard.
Yep, it is. But Allison, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate you sharing more about your career and what's happening. And it's been really nice catching up with you again.
Always fun, Adam.
Awesome.
Thanks
for coming on.